What's going on, my beautiful governors? Welcome to any Rise of Kingdoms video. Today we are going to discuss Charles Martel Harald versus Harald Alex. Now, I use both of these marches, both of these pairs in our latest KVK. All three commanders are maxed, and I will do a recap video of that KVK pretty soon, so consider subscribing if you don't want to miss that. First, we will discuss the benefits of Charles and Harald, then we are going to do the same thing for Harald and Alex, and then we will talk about in which scenarios you should use these marches, which march is better than the other in certain cases. Without further ado, let's go!
Spartans! What is your profession?
First of all, the benefits of Charles Martel primary, Harald secondary. Number one is pretty obvious. This march is tankier than the other option, and there are two reasons for that. Charles Martel has the defense tree. That's the number one thing. Harald has a skill tree. Alexander has the attack tree if you want to use Alexander primary with your Harald. And the second reason is Charles provides 20% extra defense when he's expertise, and even though Harald Sigurdsson decreases his own defense from his third skill to increase his attack, with that 20% defense boost, you can kind of mitigate that defense reduction. It's not much, 75% compared to 20%, but the defense bonus of Alexander the Great is conditional. It's only when you have a shield up, and in open field, you're not going to have that shield much for a long time, so it is conditional, and that condition is highly unlikely because even when you get that shield, that 1.2k damage shield, it's just going to disappear in seconds, so that extra 30% defense bonus when you are shielded is kind of irrelevant. This march is the more tankier option thanks to defense stats and defense 3 coming from Charles Martel. The second benefit, as you guys can see, Charles and Harald is great against swarms. This is like a poor man's Pakal Harald. That march is also amazing against swarms. This is just a cheaper version. The reason is, we already talked about it, this march is tanky, and also both of these commanders, both Charles Martel and Harald Sigurdsson, has a lot of counterattack damage. So thanks to that counterattack damage, you are able to punish swarmers because you only deal your attack damage to the enemy that you are actively targeting, but you are going to deal that counterattack damage to every single march that is hitting you. So because of the tankiness and because of extremely high counterattack damage, this march is great against swarms. Let's actually take a look at these commanders. So from his expertise, Valhalla, Harald is getting extra 20% increased counterattack damage, and if he's surrounded, counterattack damage dealt is further increased, number of surrounding enemies times 2%, maximum to 10 enemies, so you can get extra 20% counterattack damage bonus from the skill. But if you're getting surrounded by 10 enemies, rest in peace, my friend, you're just going to die. And Charles Martel, his fourth skill is just pure counterattack damage. There is no condition. 30% increased counter-attack damage. That's why this march is so good. That's why this march is poor man's Pakal and Harald. They are great against swarms. Third benefit is they are technically half the price. Since Charles Martel is a gold key commander, you don't need to, and you should not, invest any legendary commander sculptures, universal ones, on Charles Martel. Alexander is Wheel of Fortune commander, Harald as well, a regular Wheel of Fortune commander, so you will need to spend some gems, you will need to spend some universal legendary sculptures on both of these commanders, but Charles Martel, he's a gold key commander, you are going to get his sculptures from the gold keys. We maxed Charles Martel without investing not any, we had to invest 3 sculptures at the end to expertise him. It was super funny and weird. If you haven't checked it, card up in the top. I can safely say that we didn't invest any legendary commander sculptures other than 3. So instead of 690 sculptures, we only spent 3 legendary sculptures because we kept getting his sculptures from the golden chests for completely free. And unfortunately, it took us about like more than 2 years to expertise him. But at the end, we managed to do it and we are using him on the field. So technically, this march is half the price. That's why it's a big pro. The next benefit is a lot of raw stats, and these stats are mainly, other than attack, coming from Charles Martel. Extra 20% defense, extra 20% health, so 40% of stats just for your survivability, and it also has 20% extra movement speed for you to retreat better, retreat safer, and plus we are getting more stats from his museum buff. Let's check his museum buff real quick. Plus 25% attack, and on top of that, we got infantry health extra 5%. So we are getting a lot of raw stats from Charles Martel compared to Alexander the Great, but it is confirmed 100% from the developers of Rise of Kingdoms that they will get a museum buff, so that's great. We're going to see maybe when Alexander gets his museum buff, this pair will be better than this one in every single scenario. Last benefit, this march is less targeted. Now first, when I maxed Charles Martel first and paired him with my Herald and sent them to the open field, I thought this march was going to get targeted a lot because Charles is just a gold key commander, right? When you see a super old commander, when you see a gold key commander, people just target it. But this wasn't the case because probably people did target Charles Martel a lot, but at the end they got a lot of severely wounded because he's super tanky and he got a lot of damage, counterattack damage, especially when paired with Herald. And that's why they weren't getting targeted that much. I was actually surprised, but this is a huge benefit in my opinion, especially for free-to-players and low spenders, because if you get targeted less, you will have less hospital bills, which means you're going to spend less resources and less speed-ups, which is great. Now we can move on to Harald Alex and talk about their benefits, their positives. First of all, they obviously have a lot better damage, and the main reason is Alexander. If you take a look at Alexander's second skill, it has 1.7k direct damage factor with 10% chance. Like, you don't need to cast your active skill to trigger that 1.7k. It's just random with a 10% chance. So we are getting a lot of damage from here. In his third skill, we are getting extra infantry attack 30%. And on top of that, when you are not shielded, as we discussed when we were talking about Charles and Harald, most of the time you are not shielded and your troops will get 40% increase attack. So a lot of attack on Alexander the Great. That's why their damage is a lot better. Now the second benefit is actually a really good one. They are a great city pop march because they both have double instant proc skills. Already talked about the second skill of Alexander. With a 10% chance, you can just deal additional 1.7k damage, and Harald, he has a 20% chance to cast his active skill. So when you just pop up from your city and hit the enemy march, you can actually deal that 1.7k damage to the enemy with a 10% chance. It's crazy, and trust me, it really happens time to time, and when it happens, the trade is amazing. You're just gonna pop out from your city for a few seconds before the enemy can cast his active skill, and then you're just gonna go back and you're gonna look at the report and you will see you dealt a lot of damage. And the reason is that 10% chance did triggered from Alexander, and also your Herald did cast his active skill with 20% chance. So you're gonna get a lot of good reports if your enemies are around your city. Third benefit is helpful for other marches, and again this is mainly coming from Alexander the Great, because if we take a look at Alexander the Great real quick, with his active skill he doesn't only put shield for himself, but he also debuffs the enemy and makes 3 enemy marches take 30% increased damage for 4 seconds, and on top of that he puts up a smaller shield with the lowest percentage of units in the circular of area of effect. So from his first skill, you are shielding yourself and you are putting an extra shield to either yourself or to an ally. You are increasing the damage taken for 30% up to 3 enemy troops in the circular area, and this area of effect is extremely large. So this is a great skill in open field to benefit other marches. And when you are using your Herald with Alexander, since they don't rely on the active skills too much, because Herald can cast his active skill with a 20% chance and Alexander can deal 1.7k damage with a 10% chance, you can actually use your dagger, your concealed dagger on this march, because you don't need a Horn of Fury. That's why it benefits your other marches as well, because the debuff that you are applying from that concealed dagger, it doesn't benefit your march only, it debuffs the enemy, so everybody hitting that march will benefit from that debuff, and that's why this march is helpful for other marches. Well, we already talked about this one as well, great AoE debuff coming from his first skill. And last one is good use for Alexander. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of people did invest on Alexander already because he was an early game commander. We didn't have a lot of options back then. And Alexander, like, he's still a great commander. And imagine him back in the day where we had no, I don't know, Nevsky, John, Boudica, CPO, all these, even Guan Yu. He was like top tier commander. So a lot of people did invest on him. And Herald is a great way to utilize your Alexander. Many people still uses Alexander primary YSG secondary, but is just not good enough anymore. You need a proper march, a proper pair for your Alexander the Great. Could be Guan Alex, could be Harald Alex, Alex CJ, doesn't matter. But when you pair your Alexander with a proper commander, as I said, like Harald Sigurdsson, this commander is still amazing. Now, the main question is, if one of these marches are significantly better than the other, if not, in which scenarios you should use these marches? How do you choose that if you are going to go with Charles and Harald or Harald Alex? I have 3 different scenarios for you. The first one is if you're on the losing side, you don't necessarily need to lose. If the enemy is pushing to a flag, pushing to a fort, maybe it's just your kingdom's downtime. In that case, I will go with Charles and Harald because they are more tanky, they are great against swarms, because if your enemies are able to push you back to your territory, this means they are outnumbering you. And if they're outnumbering you, it's highly likely that your marches will get swarmed, and that's why you want to use the march, you want to use the pair that is better against swarms. So in those scenarios, I went with Charles primary and Harald secondary, and I'm actually super happy with that. But if we are on the opposite side, if we are the one who is pushing, if we are the one who is just trying to destroy the enemy as fast as possible, set face their marches as fast as possible, and clear the field completely to push for a flag, to push for a fort, I just want to deal a lot of damage. This is the priority goal, clearing the field as soon as possible for a rally. So I go with Harald and Alex. The last scenario is, I've already talked about it on the city pop section. If you're losing hard, if the enemy is around your city, then again, you will 100% go with Harald and Alex because, as we discussed, they are great at popping up from your city, just hitting the enemy marches for a few seconds and then coming back to your city before your enemies can cast their active skills. 95% of the time, unless you are hitting to a Pakal Herald or a Tel Takeda, you will get positive traits. Hope you guys liked it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you think any information was useful or helpful so far, just take 1 second and hit the like, hit the subscribe. It helps the channel more than you think. I see you guys on the next one. And as always, a huge thank you for our channel members. Thank you guys so much for your generous support. And here you can find the best 3-1-1 configuration, commander investment configuration for infantry mains. We are going to have 3 infantry marches, 1 archer and 1 cavalry. I highly recommend you to check that video out if you're an infantry main. I see you on that one. Bye.